If you've ever been the one who stayed while everyone else found a reason to leave, this one's for you. I'm Renee, I'm 32. I teach 4th grade at a small school outside Maryville, Tennessee, where the fog sits in the valley until almost 10 most mornings. 5 years ago, a lawyer slid one piece of paper across a courtroom table and asked my little sister a question she couldn't answer. By the time that hour was over, my mother wasn't speaking to either of us, and my sister was being walked out of the building by a court officer. To understand how we got there, you have to go back further, to a Friday afternoon in September, and a diaper bag somebody left behind my classroom bookshelf. It was the last Friday before fall break. I was packing up after a parent meeting when I heard a sound from the reading corner that didn't belong in an empty classroom. Soft, small, wrong for 6 o'clock on a Friday. I found a car seat tucked behind the bookshelf, a blanket the colour of dried clay pulled over a baby who couldn't have been more than 3 weeks old. Mr. Odell, our custodian, was 2 doors down with his cart, maybe 30 seconds from finding this himself. I got there first, and I've thought about that 30 seconds more times than I can count, because if he'd found that baby instead of me, none of the rest of this happens the way it did. There was a folded note clipped to the handle, 4 lines, in handwriting I knew from 100 birthday cards. His name is Eli. I can't right now. Please don't make this a thing. T.T. Tasha, my sister. I called her phone 7 times that night. It rang until it stopped ringing, straight to a voicemail box that was already full. I called my mother next. She picked up on the 3rd try, listened to 4 sentences, and gave me one back. That's Tasha's situation, not mine. My stepfather Gary got on the line after that and said even less. We can't take on a baby right now. Then the call ended, and I sat on my kitchen floor at 11 at night, holding a stranger's son who happened to share my last name. I spent the next 2 weeks trying to find Tasha anyway, because some part of me wasn't ready to believe a 4-line note was the whole story. I messaged old friends of hers from high school. I called the one number I had for a guy she used to date. I even drove past a duplex in Knoxville where she'd lived 2 years earlier, on the thin chance she'd gone back to something familiar. Nothing. A cousin told me she'd heard Tasha was working somewhere near Chattanooga, waiting tables, but that lead went cold within a week. She wasn't lost, she was hiding, and there's a difference. I called the state's child welfare line before midnight that first night. A caseworker named Ms. Faulkner came out the next afternoon, clipboard, sensible shoes, a voice that didn't waste a single word. She checked my smoke detectors, asked about my income, asked if I had a plan. I told her yes, even though the honest answer was that I'd built the plan in the 40 minutes before she arrived. By that evening, Eli was sleeping in a laundry basket lined with towels, because I hadn't had time to buy a bassinet yet, and I'd signed paperwork agreeing to emergency kinship placement. The temporary guardianship hearing came 4 months later, in a small courtroom with wood paneling and a heating system that clicked every few minutes. Tasha had been notified by certified mail at her last known address and never responded. My mother and Gary sent one line through a notary: "We do not object, and we request no further contact regarding this matter." The judge read it twice, looked at me, and asked if I understood what I was taking on. I said yes. He signed the order. I carried Eli out of that courthouse into a March wind that still had winter in it, and I remember thinking the hard part was over. It wasn't. It was just the first part. Here's what nobody tells you about raising a baby with no warning. The hard part isn't the no-sleep nights. It's the math. I cut my grocery budget, cancelled the gym, picked up summer tutoring hours I didn't want, and learned to hold a bottle and grade spelling tests with the same hand. I sent my mother a photo of Eli every month for 2 years. His first tooth, his first steps across the living room rug, his first Halloween in a dinosaur costume 2 sizes too big. 2 replies came back in those 2 years, both from Gary, both 1 line long: "He looks healthy." I saved every one of those emails in a folder I didn't know yet I'd need. Tasha called exactly twice in those 2 years. Neither call was about Eli. Both were about money, $300 the first time, $600 the second. I asked her both times if she wanted to know anything about her son. Both times she hung up before I finished the sentence. I wrote down the dates after each call. I didn't know why at the time. I just felt like somebody should be keeping score, even if it was only me. A co-worker of mine, a science teacher named Dana Pruitt, no relation to my stepfather, just a small-town coincidence, Noticed I was running on fumes around month 4 and started showing up at my door on Sunday nights with a casserole dish and her own kids' outgrown clothes. She never asked if I needed it. She just left it on the counter and asked how my week had gone instead. The teachers in my building threw me a baby shower in the staff lounge that I hadn't asked for and didn't know how to accept gracefully. A stack of onesies, a second-hand high chair, a gift card to the grocery store that made me cry in the supply closet afterward, which is not a sentence I expected to ever say about a gift card. Eli grew into a kid who loved trains more than almost anything else on earth. By 18 months he could name every engine in a storybook I must have read 400 times. By 3, he'd lost the train phase and replaced it with an obsession with anything that had wheels and could be taken apart. I learned to keep a small screwdriver in my purse before I learned most other parenting skills, mostly so he could fix the toaster, the remote, and once, memorably, my work badge. By Eli's 2nd birthday, a family court judge terminated Tasha's parental rights for abandonment. She didn't show up to contest it. 6 months after that, I adopted him. The papers were sealed, the way they usually are, and I thought that closed the book for good. I was wrong about that, but it would take 3 more years before I found out how wrong. Here's where it gets stranger than anyone expected, including me. When Eli was 5, a man named Marcus Webb sent a letter to my school's front office. He'd seen a photo from a class field day, posted publicly by the PTA, and something about Eli's face stopped him cold. Marcus had dated Tasha briefly, years earlier, before a National Guard deployment overseas. He never knew she'd been pregnant. He asked politely if we could talk. We met at a diner off the highway. He brought a photo of himself at 6 years old. Same set of the jaw, same crooked front tooth. We agreed to a paternity test. 11 days later, it came back positive. Marcus didn't ask for custody. He asked for a chance. We built one slowly, a supervised visit first, then an afternoon at the park, then a standing Sunday dinner that Eli started calling Mr. Marcus Night, without anyone teaching him to. Marcus brought a worn brass coin to that first real visit, something his unit had given him years before, and let Eli hold it the whole afternoon. By the 3rd visit, it lived in Eli's coat pocket, more than it lived in Marcus's. Marcus spent that first year showing up the way some men just do, without making a production of it. Saturday mornings, his truck in my driveway, sawdust still on his sleeves from a job site. He taught Eli how to sand down a birdhouse kit one piece at a time, patient through every crooked nail, and by the end of that summer there were 4 lopsided birdhouses nailed along my back fence that I never had the heart to take down. One evening, sitting on the porch steps after Eli had gone to bed, Marcus told me he'd grown up in foster care himself, bounced through 4 different houses before he turned 12, and he'd promised himself a long time ago that if he ever had a kid, that kid would never spend one night wondering who was actually staying. I missed 7 years, he said. I'm not missing the rest on a technicality. I didn't fully understand what he meant by that until much later. Marcus moved almost everything he had into a trust for Eli within a year of finding out: survivor benefits, a small life insurance policy, an inheritance from his own grandfather. He named me sole trustee. He had it notarized, and then he added one more thing nobody asked him to add: a signed statement filed along with the trust, saying that if anything ever happened to him, none of it should pass to Tasha, to my mother, or to Gary, regardless of any future claim of relation. At the time, I thought that was an unusual amount of detail for a healthy 31-year-old to put in writing. I didn't ask why. I wish I had. 14 months later, Marcus was killed in a vehicle rollover during a training exercise 2 states away. Eli was 7. I told him that evening, sitting on the porch steps, and he didn't cry right away. He just took the brass coin out of his pocket, turned it over twice, and asked very quietly if Mr. Marcus had known something like that could happen. I didn't have a real answer for that one either. Once everything settled, the trust totaled $215,000. I told no one outside my lawyer's office. I didn't need to. Somebody else found out for me. Marcus's unit posted a tribute on a public page, the kind that lists a soldier's surviving family. It mentioned survivor benefits in a single line, nothing specific. That should have meant nothing. But a cousin of Tasha's worked the front desk at the regional VA office, and apparently numbers travel faster through a small town than any court filing does. Within 3 weeks, my mother called me for the first time in over a year. Her voice was warmer than I'd heard it since I was a teenager. "We've been thinking about Eli so much," she said. "We'd love to be part of his life again." A week after that, gifts started showing up by text. Photos of a tablet, a pair of basketball shoes, a backpack with his name already stitched on it. "For whenever he's ready to see us," my mother wrote. I didn't reply to most of it. I forwarded all of it to my attorney instead. Tasha called me directly 4 days after that. It was the first time I'd heard her voice in over 5 years. She sounded different, older, careful, like she'd rehearsed the opening line in a mirror. "I know I have a lot to make up for," she said, "but he's my son. I want to be in his life. We all do." I asked her, the way I had years before, what Eli's favorite color was. The line went quiet for a few seconds. "I want to fix this," she said, which wasn't an answer, and we both seemed to know it. I told her I'd think about a supervised visit through the proper channel, and ended the call before it could turn into something else. I wrote down the date, and a summary of everything said, the same way Priya had taught me to years earlier. Priya Anand had handled my adoption years earlier, and she didn't sound surprised when I called her again. "Respond to everything in writing," she said. "Don't refuse outright. Just don't agree to anything without conditions. Every message they send is a future exhibit, whether they know it or not." I did exactly that for 19 days. On the 19th day, a process server knocked on my door at 7 in the morning, before Eli had even left for school. A custody petition. Tasha, joined by my mother and Gary as co-petitioners, asking the court to reinstate parental and grandparental rights in the best interest of the child. 19 days between a phone call about love and a lawsuit about access. Priya's paralegal ran a standard background check on my mother and Gary, the kind required whenever grandparents request custodial rights through the court. What came back wasn't standard at all. In a different county, years before I was born any wiser to it, a juvenile court had revoked my mother and Gary's foster care license after a 6-year-old boy named Caleb, placed with them for 11 months, was removed from their home for documented neglect. The file itself stayed sealed, since it involved a minor unrelated to our case, but the fact of the revocation was public record. Buried in the same filing was a second detail Priya almost missed on the first read-through. The county had also flagged Gary and my mother for continuing to submit monthly stipend paperwork for Caleb for 2 months after he'd already been removed from their home, money the state had paid out and never recovered. My mother had fostered 3 other children over the years between Tasha's childhood and mine. I'd never once heard any of their names until that file landed on Priya's desk. "This was never about love," Priya told me on the phone that night. "It's a pattern. Stipends collected on a kid who wasn't even there anymore, and now this trust, different paperwork, same motive, twice." The hearing got set for a Tuesday in late October. Eli by then had picked up a rumor at school. A classmate's older sibling knew someone who knew someone, that his real mum wanted him back. He climbed into my bed that night for the first time in over a year, the brass coin clenched in one fist, and asked me straight out, "Are you still going to be my mum after this?" I told him the only honest thing I had. "The law already decided that once. We're just going to remind everyone of it." In the courtroom, Tasha testified first, dabbing her eyes right on cue, saying she'd always planned to come back for him once she got on her feet. "I was 20 years old and scared," she told the judge. "I thought Renee could give him a better start while I figured things out." When Russell Cobb asked if she'd ever tried to reconnect, she said yes, many times, and that I'd shut the door on her. My mother testified that I'd kept her grandson from her out of spite, and never once looked at the folder sitting closed on the table in front of her own attorney. Gary read 3 sentences off a note card, without looking up once, something about family belonging together, and sat back down before anyone could ask him a follow-up question. Russell Cobb turned to me on cross-examination, and asked if I'd ever kept Eli from seeing his grandparents. I told him no. I had 91 emails over 5 years to prove it, and I'd brought copies of every single one. He didn't ask to see them. He asked instead if I thought a child benefited from knowing his biological family. I told him a child benefits from people who show up, and that I had the dates to back that up too. He moved on fast after that, the way people do when a question stops working in their favor. Priya never raised her voice through any of it. She laid the timeline out on a single page, the public tribute post, the date, the lawsuit, filed 19 days later. She read Gary's one-line reply from year 2 of the email log. He looks healthy, and let it sit in the room without comment. Then she introduced Marcus's notarized statement, the one excluding all 3 of them by name. Then last, she introduced the old licensing revocation, including the line about stipend payments collected on a child who was no longer there. Judge Okafor read the revocation order twice. She set it down, looked at my mother, and asked one question. Were you planning to disclose this to the court yourselves, or were you hoping no one would check? Nobody answered her. She ruled from the bench less than 10 minutes later. The petition was denied with prejudice. The request for grandparent visitation was denied as well, on the grounds that the timing of the filing, 19 days after learning of an inheritance, following years of undocumented contact and an undisclosed history with the state, raised, in her words, serious questions about whose interest was actually being protected here. My mother stood up so fast, her chair scraped the floor. He is still my blood, she said. Judge Okafor didn't even look up from her notes. Then you had 7 years to act like it, she said, and called the next case. Outside the courthouse, Gary caught up to me in the parking lot, alone, no note card this time. I should have said something different in there, he said. I didn't. He didn't ask for anything else, and he didn't wait around for a response. He just walked to his truck and left, and that was the last I heard from him. I drove straight to the after-school program to pick up Eli. He ran at me across the gym before I'd gotten both feet out of the car, asking if it was over, if he had to go anywhere, if I was still coming to his game on Saturday. I said yes to all 3, and meant every one of them. That night we made grilled cheese because it was the only thing left in the fridge, and he beat me 3 rounds straight at Uno, and somewhere around 8 o'clock he fell asleep on the couch before we'd even finished the movie, the brass coin still warm in his hand. I sat there a while after, not doing much of anything, just watching him breathe the way you do with a kid you almost lost twice. My mother sent one text 2 weeks later, "Hope you're happy." I didn't write back. Some messages aren't actually questions, no matter how they're punctuated, and they don't deserve an answer dressed up as one. Eli's 8 now. He still brings up Mr. Marcus sometimes, out of nowhere, usually with a question I can't fully answer. Last week it was, "Do you think he'd be happy I made the travel team?" I told him yes. I believe that's true. People keep asking me what actually changed things that day in court, what the one piece of evidence was that ended it. It wasn't the trust. It wasn't even the old file, not by itself. It was 5 years of small, undramatic, unrewarded effort, written down on the days it happened, so that on the one day it finally mattered, there was nothing left for anyone to argue with. If you've ever done the quiet work nobody noticed and wondered if any of it counted, it counted. Somebody's keeping score, even on the days it doesn't feel like it. Tell me in the comments if you've ever had to prove something to your own family that should have never needed proving in the first place. I'll see you in the next one.